Hi, everybody, and welcome back. Today's guest is Stefan Barbas, all the way from Perth in Australia. Stefan worked as a mental health occupational therapist before turning his knowledge and expertise to coaching. Stefan has found that most people feel unfulfilled because they're searching to find their purpose as they navigate their way through life. And this is leading to them feeling, well, lost and lonely. Applying his expertise in mental health, Stefan has put together a roadmap, a mindset, if you like, of the why and how people can move themselves from where they are to where they want to be. So, in today's talk, we will be covering why people feel lonely and depressed, how they can find their purpose in life, the steps to take to begin the change that they want to see, ways to stop feeling so insecure, how we can all create a new path for ourselves, and the unseen force that is killing our potential. And make sure you stick around for that one. This is going to be a fascinating and incredibly informative talk, so let's get going. Stefan, thank you so much for agreeing to join me here today. And I'm really interested to hear what you have to say. So perhaps you'd like to start with a little bit about yourself, your background, and how you first got into the whole area of therapy and then moved on to coaching.
Absolutely. Well, my pleasure, Deborah. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate you hosting this space for me. So yeah, like as you mentioned, I'm a occupational therapist, but I've kind of moved more onto the mental health side, and now I've done some coaching. So how I really got into that journey is that from a young age, I've known from very early on that I've wanted to help people. I've always loved helping people. I get a lot of my sense of joy and satisfaction out of that. And it was just only natural for me to gravitate towards a profession that was aimed towards that. Did I know I wanted to do occupational therapy? No, right? And I think that's something that most teens struggle with when they're growing up in school and they don't know what they want to do, but they might want to go to university, they might not want to go. So it was a hard one. But went to university. I ended up first studying health science. And yeah, it was what I wanted to do, and it was cool. But then I had a friend come up to me and said, "Look, I'm probably going to change into occupational therapy." And I go, "What's that?" And she kind of said to me, "Well, it's just a profession where you really help people kind of regain their function again and help them live normal lives." And I was like, "Yeah, look, that sounds really cool to me. That sounds right up my alley." And so I went into occupational therapy, ended up graduating from there. As I graduated, did I look back and think this is what I wanted to do for the rest of my life? And if I'm going to be honest with you, no, it wasn't a path like that. I ended up working at a hospital, and in that hospital, in the Australian system, you get put all different areas. So I worked with older adults, I worked with youth, I worked with adults, I worked with mental health patients. And it was really when I went into the mental health ward that I started to begin to find my calling. I started to really gain an insight. I was like, wow, this is it. This is really what I wanted to do. Because as I spoke with a lot of individuals, I all saw that they had the same patterns. They were struggling with their sense of purpose. They were struggling with being able to build meaningful relationships in their life, to build fulfilling jobs. And quite frankly, it was a sense that it was like shining a mirror onto my life as well at that moment in time. And I found that I was no different to them, and that I was sharing those same issues and problems that they were experiencing. And so it was at that point where I really kind of sat with myself and said, you know what, actually want to spend the rest of my life understanding, why do people suffer? I think that I'm digressing here a little bit, but I think that we all have these questions in our lives that just grip us, and we kind of end up going down the rabbit hole. And so the question of why do we suffer has been something that's been on my mind for, I can say, for the past 5 to 10 years now. And I've just dedicated my life to really kind of understanding that question and trying to tackle it from as many aspects as possible. And I realize it's not a simple question to answer, as I'm
Mm.
sure you're aware, because there's so many different factors that are at play that at that. And so I feel like purpose is a big part of that, and it is really important. But there's also some other factors as well that can be quite important with that in terms of your social relationships, having fulfilling work that you enjoy, being able to have a sense of community and belonging. And it's just kind of building a life that kind of encapsulates all of these areas all at once. And that can be hard for some people sometimes.
Yes, yes. No, I think you've really encapsulated that so well. And I think a lot of people, I think everybody watching this is going to really recognize themselves in how you've explained that, in the same way that you recognized yourself when you found yourself in that whole area of mental health and what does this mean to people. And so uh, how did you see that manifesting? So when you went to work in mental health, how
Mhm.
did you see the mental health issues manifesting themselves differently in people? So was it
Mm.
all one thing, or was it, people were feeling down about something, and
Mm.
then it was something different to how somebody else was feeling. So, how did you first come about recognizing that there were all these different elements to
Mm.
that whole mental health area?
Yeah, it's a very good question. And it was something that I think when I first started to notice is that when we were in this hospital and we were working with all these types of patients, and when I say the patients that I work with people with depression, anxiety, bipolar, schizophrenia, OCD, so a very wide range of different diagnoses. And quite often, the first thing that most professionals or doctors would, psychiatrists would do is give medication. And I'm not here to say that I'm against medication. I think medication is fantastic. It does help a lot of people. And I want to really clarify that as well. But it's not a one size fits all solution. It's not a miracle pill that's going to fix all of your problems. And I started to notice when I was working in the hospitals is that we started to use that as a one size fits all. And I kind of see it as putting a band-aid over a knife wound. It doesn't actually heal the wound, it's just trying to suppress the symptoms. And what I noticed was that underneath, there was a lot of psychological needs that weren't being met with these individuals. And so that varies from person to person, and it's something that's very specific to the individual. But I started to find personally was that I wanted to get to know the person a little bit more. I wanted to understand why they felt the way they felt, and maybe help shine a mirror onto them as well to help them see why they felt the way they felt. And quite often I found was that people that experience mental health issues, particularly like depression, anxiety, is that there's these deep underlying needs that are not being met. And that might be because they've experienced a traumatic childhood and they've developed these coping mechanisms to help deal with that. And trauma is a very significant thing because trauma can shape our whole worldview. It shapes not only our worldview, how we see the world, but it shapes how we see ourselves as well. And so what I notice is that we've all experienced trauma in some kind. And I can't remember who coined the term, but there's the term capital T trauma, which are the more severe types of trauma that we go through, and then the little t traumas, where I think most people don't recognize that they've experienced. And maybe that's someone calling them ugly in high school, or for example, me getting called short in high school. So they might not seem significant, but to the person they mean everything. And so we carry these things with us that we don't really take the time to allow to process and be able to work through. And what once kept us safe is actually holding us back now. And so what I realized is that I really wanted to work with people to help improve their self-awareness, to develop an understanding about themselves so that they can start to notice the patterns. Because that's all that is that there's a patterns of behavior that continues to keep holding them back. And I'm a big believer that life will continue to present us with opportunities to show us where we're not free. And so it's about having the courage to be able to notice those patterns, to be able to begin to work towards a version of yourself that you want to be. And that can be hard for some people, Deborah.
Yeah, I'm sure I was actually that was my next point I was going to come on to because the way you've explained that then is that for a lot of people, the next step is facing up to something that maybe that happened in their childhood or as a teenager that they've never really thought about. And it might be like the not so obvious traumas, as you say, the sort of little t traumas that maybe they took home and they explained to their parents, and their parents went, "Oh, you just ignore that. You just pretend, you just gloss over that and pretend like
Mm,
it's not happened, and you just, carry on." Whereas they take that thread into later life and it's something that has always bothered that. And you could have two people who respond to a little T trauma completely
differently.
differently. And for one
Absolutely.
person, they're able to take that forwards as a reason to motivate themselves. I'm going to prove them wrong. And for the next person, it's something that is always going to hold them back. And at some
Mm,
point, in order to move on, they've got to have, as you say, have the courage to look at that, what by that stage has probably started to become this huge fear almost that they're
mm,
that they're carrying around.
mm,
Um, and might be quite scary for somebody to kind of face up to. So when you're dealing with somebody who finds themselves in that situation where they've had this little T trauma that then throughout their life, and maybe they're in their 40s or 50s or older, and they want to face up to it, but it's really, really scary. So how do you begin to even talk to somebody about that?
mm. It's a great question, Deborah, and I really like how you coined the two different types of people is that one can actually take that on and begin to move forward, and one can actually hold on to it and can begin to hold them back. And that's why treatment of mental health is so difficult in the modern world because it's not a one size fits all approach. It's a very personalized approach for the person. And so, when if the advice I would give to someone that's really struggling with, you could say like a limiting belief or a trauma that's holding them back, is that developing a sense, a safe, secure relationship with the person is the most important thing. And I know that if you don't have rapport with an individual, and this can be anyone, right? It can be you can be a son, a father, a mother. It's about being able to feel and empathize with the person, to let the person know that they're not alone, that you can sit in the mud with them, that you can share their struggles. You might not have lived that experience that they've experienced, but you can then sit and try to understand what they've gone through. And until a person can begin to recognize that, you know what, this person actually understands me, this person actually makes me feel safe, that's when they're more acceptable to actually to taking on the advice or the wisdom or insight that you might be able to give them.
Yeah, yeah, lovely. Thank you. And how about if somebody is thinking to themselves, maybe I don't want to get help, but I just want to start with with myself. How do I become a friend to myself? How do
Mm,
I allow myself the to become maybe to think about something that has happened in the past and how can I look at myself like really sort of a self-compassionate point
mm,
of view where you're almost taking a step back so you're kind of not so invested in the feeling that you have that comes along with the trauma. You
mm.
know, are there any ways in which somebody can sort of take a step back and sort of view that moment, that's something that happened to them, where they can then begin that healing process?
Yeah, it's a great question. And once again, like for the nuance of the conversation, it all depends on the type of the trauma that the person has experienced. I mean, someone that's gone through significant traumas, I think they need to be with a licensed
Yeah.
professional, actually take the time to work through that at their own space. But for the person who's just kind of wanting to start that self-healing process and start to work on yourself, it's against the counterculture question, but spending time alone. And I think that's something that we all struggle with in this modern world is that we spend time on our phones, we spend time watching Netflix, we spend time just distracting ourselves. Why? Because we distract ourselves because we can't stand to feel and be with ourselves. And that is often the remedy for healing, is that you need to sit with the pain. You need to allow the pain to come up. You need to be able to feel that pain and start to have that, like you said, that self-compassionate view. And it's allowing yourself to be able to feel what's come up and understand that that pain has served you for a moment in your life. And it's about looking and saying, okay, what were the gifts that I got from this situation? What were the ways that I could have learned or grown as a person? And Carol Dweck has done a lot of research on this in terms of her growth mindset. And you can really see the impact of that. Is that I've noticed personally in the clients that I've worked with, is that the clients who have gone through any significant traumas, is that they've really looked at their life and they've looked at those traumas of how has it served them. And I know to your audience that might seem so crazy to think to the person that's saying, well, my abuser hit me and they did unspeakable things. In no way am I saying that that is justified or that is any sort of acceptable behavior at all. But the person that wanted to heal from that realized that, you know what, the person that it's actually impacting the most is me. And so they wanted to start to begin to learn, okay, so how can I grow from this experience? What could I learn from this? What could I be able to do differently or grow into? And it's those people that would able to kind of start to develop that gentle self-compassion with themselves that started to see the most change in their life.
Yes, yes. Absolutely. And do you think that that journaling helps? Because I think that journaling has become quite popular nowadays, and sort of like, as you say, by sort of sitting with yourself
Mm,
and just allowing yourself to have the time to process your thoughts that maybe you've suppressed for so many years. And actually, when you write those down, when you allow those thoughts to come in, when you are beginning to process those thoughts, and then you're beginning to write them down, and you're looking at those, and maybe sometimes, I'm not saying all the time, but sometimes it can be the fear of facing up to something is worse than when you've started to process the fear itself. So when you've broken that fear down, you've realized that when you've broken it down into its various kind of components, that actually they were maybe not that it's something you can work on because they were not as scary as the fear of having to face up to them, you know, in that first moment of allowing those fears, those thoughts. So what do you think about sort of journaling, the thought process, the journaling,
mhm.
going back a few days later and having a look at that?
Yeah. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing, journaling. I've got a journal on my desk right here. I'm looking at it right now. I've been journaling for the past 8 years. I
Right.
think journaling's a fantastic way to do this self-inquiry, to start looking into yourself. And it's a great point that you mentioned about fears, and fears can only live in the dark.
Mm.
And so journaling is a great way to really shine a light in a dark part of ourselves that we are refusing to see. And so when you shine a light in a dark place, the darkness goes away, it gets consumed by the light, and you begin to integrate that within you. Because the goal of journaling or any healing is not to push away or separate parts of yourself. It's about accepting those parts of yourself, accepting that your imperfections, your fears, your insecurities, all of these make you who you are. They make you your unique, authentic person. They make you human. And so, if you learn to be able to begin to accept these parts of yourself, accept neglecting them and pushing them aside and wishing them that they should be differently, that's where you create that resistance within yourself.
Mm.
That's where you create that sense of separation, that sense of lack, that sense of I should be this person, or I'll be happy when I have this. And so the whole goal of healing is the integration. It's about being able to take your fears, your insecurities, your doubts, and be able to make them part of who you are. And I think journaling is a very powerful way to do that because what it does is it creates a dialogue with yourself. And think about this for a moment, is that your audience right now is listening to me speak. I'm speaking English, I'm speaking words, I'm putting them together in sentences. These words hold meaning. And so your audience is listening to what I'm saying and it resonates with them. And so what journaling is doing is essentially it's writing down your internal code. It's writing down all the thoughts that you have. It's seeing the pattern of your mind onto the paper. And it's such a powerful experience because for the first time, you're separating your thoughts into paper and you're seeing the difference. And just like we mentioned, is that it's about noticing those patterns. When you journal for a long enough period and you actually begin to look back, you can start to recognize those patterns, the patterns of thought, the fears, the doubts, and you can begin to see that from a more objective perspective. Because I think the issue that most people feel or they experience is that they're fused with their thoughts. They're fused with their fears and their insecurities. And they're like, I'm insecure, or I'm fearful, or I'm not good enough. And when you start journaling, it becomes a process of, I am feeling not good enough. I am experiencing anxiety, right? You're separating yourself from how you feel and you're looking at it objectively. And that's when you start to kind of develop this consciousness, this understanding that you're not your thoughts, you're not your feelings, you're the observer of your thoughts and feelings. And I had this experience myself because when I was 18, I kind of went through this existential crisis in a sense, as that what is my meaning in life? What is my purpose? Why am I here? And I really kind of um, grappled with these hard questions at a very young age. And I wanted the answers. I wanted to understand what it is. And it wasn't until I really kind of got the book of Eckhart Tolle, like I'm sure you know as well, like multiple of his books and watching his videos, that he really opened up my mind to that we're not our thoughts, we're not our body, we're the consciousness, we're the observer of those. And it got me into meditation, it got me into mindfulness, and it was about really being present within myself. And ever since I noticed that, it got me into journaling as well, Deborah. And ever since I noticed that, you just gain more clarity about yourself. And I think that's what people are missing most in their life is a sense of clarity. Because when you know
Yes.
who you are, you make
Mm,
choices that are aligned, you know your values, you make choices that are aligned with that, and
mm.
your actions and your words are more aligned. You feel more fulfilled because you're doing what you say you're going to do. And I
Yes,
think that's what
yes.
most people struggle with these days.
Yeah. I absolutely totally agree with you. And I think part of the problem is, like you've pointed out there, that we label ourselves as being something. I'm this, I'm an anxious person, I'm this, that, and the other. When
I'm depressed.
I'm depressed. And whereas, when we can take a step back from that, when we can separate ourselves from those thoughts and we can look at those thoughts and we can say, well, because sometimes I've found what is really useful sometimes is in the past I'll have ruminated on some things happened. I've ruminated on it for days, weeks, months at a time. Oh, I am this, I've labeled myself as something. And then what I find quite useful is when I've asked myself the question, well, where's the evidence that I am as I say I am?
Mm,
Where is the evidence? And most of the time, I've actually not been able to find the evidence. So I've come up with this label for myself. I've somehow come up with this label for myself. I've labeled myself as something that I'm actually not.
Mm,
How do you think that we do that? I mean, is it like social media? Is it because we have this constant drip pressure on ourselves to be something and we're trying to strive to be this something, and if we fall short of that, we label ourselves something, and then those negative thoughts, we seem to carry them through day by day, don't we? so
mm,
so how can we, what's causing that, do you think?
You've brought up a very good point, and I think it's a problem that the modern world, the Western world, experiences a lot. And what causes it is a multitude of factors. You touched upon it briefly in terms of the social media. Culture has a massive impact on us. We're all being conditioned whether we know it or not. Okay. First, we start out the first 7 years of your life, you're being conditioned by your parents.
Mm,
And you're observing your parents' behaviors. You're observing the way your parents respond to threats. You're observing the way your parents speak to you. So where did they learn that? They learned it from their parents. And necessarily, if it wasn't a really good, I'm not saying the parents aren't good, but if they learn unhelpful patterns of behavior,
mm,
that's just going to be passed on to you, and you're going to expect that to be normal,
mm,
right? So that's a really important topic to. Do you want me to put my light on, actually? Sorry.
mm.
Have I gone a bit dark?
Yes, slightly darker.
Sorry, give me
Yeah,
1 second.
slightly. The
And I'll
lights,
touch on it in a
yes,
sec.
okay.
There you go. That should be
Oh,
better.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
So
better.
I'll carry on where I was
Yes,
going.
yes.
So the first 1 to 7 years of our life is extremely important because that's where we learn our behaviors from our parents. We learn their ways of thinking. We learn the way that they look at the world. And that just gets conditioned into us from a very young age. And so we start to think that that is how the world is. And then when you get older, you then get more influenced by your friends. You want to fit in. You start to disobey and rebel against your parents, and you're more focused on about can I fit in with my group of people? How can I find my tribe?
Mm,
And that's when social media can become a big influence. And we see this so much in the modern world, and it's where I'm working towards more now, is that young boys and young girls are conditioned very differently. Young girls are taught that their worth is in their appearance and that they need to look good. They need to have the best face, the lips, the boobs, the
mm,
bum, whatever it is. And they derive their sense of worth from how they look.
mm,
And when
totally.
you're, yeah, and I'm sure you would know about this as well, it's like when you're comparing yourself to these unrealistic expectations on social media, you're never going to live up to that,
No.
right? And
Mm,
so the same is for young men as well. And I can speak to this being a young man, is that for a lot of my teenage and probably still a little bit to a degree today, I used to get a lot of my worth from achievement, that
mm,
I wouldn't feel worthy enough unless I achieved. I wouldn't feel worthy of love and appreciation unless I actually had something of worth, and that I had a good business or I made X amount of money. And these narratives, they run your life. I mean, it wasn't until really 2 to 3 years ago where I actually sat back and thought, well, you know what? I'm actually getting run by this narrative right now.
mm,
I'm feeling anxious. I'm feeling overwhelmed. And it's like, why? Because I'm not this perceived person of who I think I should be.
yeah.
And I think the word should is one of the most dangerous words that we can use because it implies that we should be something other than who we are. And I should be working out. I should be doing this. And I always ask when people ask me this question, according to who? And it's like according to who? And most people are like, you know what, you're right. I don't know what my mum said or what this
Yes.
person on YouTube says. And so how do you break through from that? How do you begin to
Mm,
actually to break away from these conditioning? It's having that self-awareness. And
mm,
the first step that I usually go with a lot of my clients is starting to begin to understand your values and really wrestling with these questions of why you see life the way it is. Why do you believe that thought? Or why do you believe you're unworthy? Like you said, packing it down. Is there evidence to support this? If not, what do I believe?
Mm.
And Deborah, that can only happen when you spend the time with yourself. It's work. And I think that's one of the biggest problems in this today's society, in my opinion, is that everything takes work. Relationships take work.
Mm.
A good career takes work. Healing takes work. But in a society when we're conditioned with immediate gratification, I mean, I can go on my phone, I can get Uber Eats to my door straight away. I can get Amazon with a one click. I can go on Tinder and swipe and match with 100 different girls.
Mm.
So we're conditioned with this immediate gratification that I need to get results straight away, when often real life is the contrary. Real life hits you that there's work to be done. You need to be able to pursue. You need to be able to persist with what's going on. And that is the same with discovering yourself and healing, is
Mm.
that it takes time. You need to sit with the discomfort. And I think that we've lost that ability in this
Yeah.
modern world, that we've lost the ability to sit with uncomfortable feelings, to sit with emotions, and we go for the easy way. We distract ourselves. We put on a TV show, we online shop, we smoke, we drink. And that is the first step, is being able to take the time to be by yourself. And if
Mm.
you can't do that with a therapist or do that with a trusted friend and start to
Yes.
have these conversations a little bit
Mm,
more.
mm. No, I think that's really good. And you bring up some very, very interesting points there. I want to delve a bit deeper into the values thing, I think,
Mm,
because I think when you were talking there, what struck me was that in the past, you didn't have so much of the pressure from the social media. And now
mm,
I think the problem is that we see people that we want to be like, but what we see is their end result. We don't see
hmm
the values that they've based their journey on that might
hmm
be completely wrong for us. So we're trying to get to it, we're trying to reach that pinnacle that might be, the pinnacle of that mountain that might be totally the wrong mountain for us. And
You're bang on. Yeah. We're
and
trying to
so
be we're trying to be second at being someone else instead of being first
yes,
at being.
so it's really about setting your own roadmap
Hmm
out.
hmm
And maybe, how can somebody begin to work out what their values are? So where does somebody begin with that roadmap of
Yeah.
like,
And
where
and
am I going to?
mm, and this is very tough for people. This is extremely tough because we're bombarded with all this information of I should be
Mm.
doing this, I should be doing that. And it's kind of like going into a lake with murky water. Of course, you're going to be scared to take the next step because you don't know you don't know what you're diving into. But when you see a lake that's clear, you can see the sand underneath. It's a lot easier to take action because you've got clarity. And so, where do you begin on that? It has to start first with your values. And so values for me is like your lighthouse in a dark room. So it's going to always at least guide the direction that you're going to hold your life. And that the way you start to do that first is asking yourself what's not important to you. And I like to use a bit of inverse thinking for this because it's really hard for us to find out, okay, what is meaningful for us? It's hard to find out the good things, but you know what? You're really good at picking out the bad things. Your brain's
Yeah.
hardwired to look for threats, right? And so your brain wants to stay away from the things that are really bad. So my biggest advice and the thing that I give is what don't you want your life to look like? So what would be the worst life possible for you? And people would say I'd be overweight, I'd be not working a job that I don't like. And they'll really kind of be quick at springing off all these examples of what they don't. And then you begin to ask the opposite of that question and go, okay, so what type of job would you like? Like the
Mm.
characteristics of it. And they're like, well, maybe I want to be a little bit more free with my time, or maybe I want to spend more time with my family. Or maybe I want a blend of working at home and spending time with the community. And then as you can see, they start to begin to craft their ideal version of themselves because they're
Mm,
giving themselves the time to think about what that is. But values are important because you're always going to be presented in the world with the shiny object,
mm,
with the influence from others. And if you don't know your values, you're going to adopt someone else's values in life.
mm,
And
mm,
so knowing your values is kind of just what grounds you. What keeps you centered and what helps you make choices that allow you to move towards that direction.
mm,
It allows you to take any influence that comes in and go, you know what? Does this resonate with what I value? Does this resonate with the person that I wish to create? And if it does, great, you can take that choice and action. The lake's clear. And if it doesn't, then it's a good example to go, you know what?
mm.
This doesn't resonate with me. I'm not going to move in that direction.
Yes, yes, good. So people can begin by thinking to themselves, right, they can begin by moving away from what they don't want.
Mm.
So that's the
Start to know
first
what you
set
don't
of
want.
questions. And
Mhm.
then the second set of questions they can ask themselves is, what do I want? How do I see myself? What do I want to see as my ideal self?
Mm.
And then they can begin to almost reverse engineer that,
Yeah.
coming
Yeah,
back
definitely.
of, thinking about then, so to get to that ideal, what would need to change? What would how would I, and that's behavior and mindset. So
Yeah.
yeah, so they
Who
can,
is that
and
type of person? Like, who is that
yes,
person I need to be? Like you said, the
mm,
behavior, the mindset, and it's starting to begin to act as if. And watch out, you're going to be hit with a ton of resistance,
mm,
right? You're going to be hit with all of that conditioning. You're going to be hit with I'm not good enough. Who do I think I am to do this?
mm,
And that's the work. That's the work. It's starting to recognize that those things, those beliefs, they're just there to keep you safe.
mm,
And I think that's been one of the biggest pivotal most biggest insight for me on my growth is that they're all there. They once kept you safe and
mm,
they want to keep you safe because the brain is just wired for survival. It just wants to keep you surviving. And so it's going to keep you in your comfort zone because that's predictable. That's what's familiar. But if you're someone that has these desires and you've got these ambitions to want a better life for yourself, you
mm,
realize that it has to come out of that comfort zone. A
mm,
point of view has to go into the unknown, into the unfamiliar, because that's when you begin to start to find yourself. And I think one of the biggest and the best questions that you can ask yourself is not who am I, it's who am I becoming?
mm.
Because it's the choices that you take today that influence who you are tomorrow. And so if you can start to think of the question of who am I becoming, and you start to make choices that align with that person,
Mm.
over time you gradually do become that person.
Yeah.
And I think it's about extending, like you said, mindset is that, like we said about before, we've got that instant gratification. I want to
Mm.
be a millionaire tomorrow. I want to be skinny. I want to be skinny tomorrow. It's why Ozempic's blown up because it
Yeah,
promises instant fixes. And
totally.
so something that's helped me is adopting that good things take time to build. And if I want to be able to change myself, I have to have that mantra in my head as well, is that the life that I want takes time to build. And I want to be able to enjoy that journey and that process of becoming.
Yes. And so really, I think what you were saying just then was, it in order to become the person that we want to be, we have to appreciate that it's going to feel uncomfortable. And that if we are in a place of feeling uncomfortable, that might be a good thing, because that means that we are changing, that we are changing our mindsets, and that we
Mhm.
are moving in the direction that we want to be.
Yeah. And it's
And
reinforcing that. It's
mm,
like you said, it's celebrating yourself for that. Because quite often when we feel that feeling, we kind of go back into our shell and we contract. But then you want to train
mm,
yourself to celebrate that. Like
yes,
that's great. You're taking steps towards the person you want to be. And then when you start to
mm,
celebrate those behaviors, those actions, they start to become hardwired. And so, like the
yes,
analogy that I like to give is that for the first, let's say you're 25 years old, for the first 1 to 25 years old, you've been skiing down the same hill on the same route. And
Mm.
what happens when you do that is you form deep kind of narrow, like you
Yeah, you
do.
do.
And
You
so when
do.
you go to that hill, you just naturally go down the same slope.
Yeah.
And so what you're doing now is you're deciding to ski on a different mountain.
Mm.
And the more you make those choices, the more that the brain begins to
Mm.
wire, the more easier it gets over time. And
Yes,
it's just like
yes.
anything. Like whenever you ride a bike, yes, you sucked when you first started riding a bike.
Mm.
Yes, maybe you fell off. Maybe you grazed your knee. But then when you stuck to it, eventually you you were able to ride the bike. You're able to get it done.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's wired in us, Deborah. I mean, you
Mm.
look at kids when they're learning to walk, they will fall over 100 times and they'll get up. Why? And they will walk. They don't say fail. They don't go, oh, look at me, I fell 100 times. I'm worthless.
Mm.
No, they keep going.
They they
We've
do.
and we've got that in us, right? We've got this sense of mastery in us. And it's just about being able to develop that kind of belief and trust in yourself again.
Yeah.
And it takes time. It
It does
takes time.
take,
I'm not
yeah,
here to
it
say that's
does.
going to happen overnight,
No.
but that's the beautiful part of the journey. You don't
Mm.
want it to happen overnight.
Mm.
Why would you want it to happen overnight? You just rob yourself of all the years of progress and the years of
Mm.
hardships and triumph. I think
Mm.
that's where the beauty in life comes from.
Mm. And I think that's exactly it. That's why we put all this pressure onto ourselves about, oh, I want to be like this. And so we live in a world, as you say, where we can get things instantly. So it just
Mm,
doesn't occur to us that something is going to take time and something is. So
mm,
to learn something new means that it is going to be a process of ups and downs. So, I wouldn't expect myself to think to myself, right, okay, so tomorrow I'm going to start learning French, which means that by Friday I should be a fluent speaker. I mean, you just wouldn't do it.
you wouldn't, right?
You just wouldn't even imagine. It's not even about putting that pressure on yourself. You would know, well, if I start learning French on Monday, there's no way I can be fluent by Friday
Exactly.
because obviously it's going to take years to do that. And
Mm,
yet, for some reason, we've just put so much pressure onto ourselves
mm.
that we should be able to change almost instantaneously.
And that's why you've raised a beautiful point in terms of the language side of things, is that our expectations are the ones that hold us back.
Mm,
We expect things to be easy. We expect things to get what we want straight away. And because our life doesn't match our expectations, we feel suffering,
mm,
right? Because we expect life to be a certain way, but life is actually this way. And because it's not like that, we experience that suffering. And that's why I think it's extremely important for a person to follow their values, to feel fulfilled and aligned. Because you know what? I love this quote. And it goes, the person who enjoys walking is always going to get further than the person who's just going there for the destination.
yeah.
Right. And that's why I feel it's important to understand, what is your purpose? What is it that you want to move towards? Because in those times of hardship, in those times of real difficult moments, you're more likely to persevere. You're more likely to get up because you can see that your life has a greater meaning. You can see that your life has a greater purpose and you're going to move towards that direction. And
Yeah.
that's why it's really important to make sure that you're climbing the right mountain, your
Mm,
mountain, and you're internally motivated instead of, so you're intrinsically motivated instead
mm,
of extrinsically motivated.
mm, mm,
And that's why this work's so important, because if you are adopting other people's values and you're trying to kind of navigate through the external world through other people's opinions and perspectives, when the hardship comes, you're going to drop that identity because you're not tied to it.
mm,
But when you have consciously decided this and you've decided that whatever I'm pursuing is meaningful, it's important to me, and you really articulate your why behind it, you're much more likely to be resilient. You're much more likely to get up after your falls. You're much more likely to just keep pursuing in the face of suffering. And that is what's really important in this day and age to try and find.
yeah. Yeah. And just going back to something quickly. So
Mm,
I run a monthly Zoom group, and one of the topics that I was doing this month was really about how we can harness dopamine
mm,
in a positive way. Because normally, when I talk to my Zoom group about dopamine, I'm talking about it in a negative way. So,
mm,
it's like the ultra processed food, it triggers the dopamine in our brain. So that's how we can become really addicted to
mm,
certain foods. It's that trigger point of the high sugar and the high fat.
mm.
Um, that sort of triggers this dopamine release in our brain that makes us want to continue to eating ultra processed food more and more and more. But there is
Definitely.
also a positive side to dopamine, and we can use that. Really, just going back to a point that you were saying a few minutes ago. So where we do something that is, how can I put this? So where we take a step that is in the direction that we want to go in, if
Mm,
we self-praise in that moment, that releases dopamine in the brain.
absolutely.
So it's
Absolutely.
like you were talking about the skiers coming down the hill, and it's just about forming those new grooves. And one
Hmm.
thing that can help us to form those grooves is this idea of self-praise, is this idea of the dopamine. So, and what I would say, like, bringing it back to a sort of food and nutritional aspect just for a second, what I would say to my Zoom group is that, well, when you're in the supermarket and you're not choosing something that is ultra processed, but you're choosing real food, that is the moment to say to yourself, well done, that is
Mm,
brilliant. And whilst it may seem, oh, that's a bit cheesy, isn't it? To
mm,
say to sort of be in that self-praising mode. That's what's going to get that dopamine going in your brain, and that's what's going to create that link between a feel-good feeling and that behavior that
mm,
you've just done. So just bringing that back to this topic now.
mm.
Someone's decided that this is the value that they want to have. So when they take a step in the direction of that value, if they are if they're noticing that, and if they're saying, yeah, I've done that, that's brilliant, that's amazing that I've done that, because I've now taken a step further in the direction that I want to go. So
Hmm.
that's one small step. And really, I think this journey of getting to where you want to go to, as in your life roadmap, your purpose roadmap, is lots and lots and lots of tiny, tiny steps. So it's not
Absolutely.
leaps. It's not, oh, this week I'm like this and next week I'm going to be like that. It's the tiniest steps, and recognizing each of those steps as we go along.
Mm.
And saying to ourselves, well done, because now I'm a step nearer to the person that I want to become.
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head, Deborah. You really have. And it's like it's creating those positive reinforcements. And I think we all know about a negative feedback loop is that when you
Mm,
think anxiously, you feel anxiously, you then behave anxiously, and
mm,
then you have an action that reinforces the anxious thought and it creates this negative loop. We're
yes.
all aware of those loops, and I'm sure
Mm,
you've had those experiences. I've had plenty of those
yeah.
experiences as well. But quite often we fail to neglect the impact of a positive feedback loop
Mm,
too.
yeah.
And what are the influences of actually celebrating those small wins
Mm,
and actually starting to actually recognize that you're taking the steps in the right direction, because that then creates positive momentum. And there was an interesting study that was done, I think, with the NBA team, is that the they measured the free throw accuracy of their shooters, and they noticed that the performances of the players were a lot better when they high-fived each other. Even if they missed, they high-fived each other. That positive reinforcement.
mm,
And they showed that And that's why you see it all in NBA now is that they go for shots and then they'll high five each other, even if they miss, because they realize that the positive reinforcement is so powerful that it just motivates more positive change into a person's life. And I feel that that's the hardest for some people. Some
Mm,
people are stuck in that self-defeating mentality, the feeling that I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy of this change, I'm not deserving of this change. And
mm,
that's where they people get stuck on. And
yeah.
I felt this as well. I'm going to speak from experience, is that
Mm,
I struggled for a long, long time to recognize my wins because I was battling this deep sense of inadequacy within myself.
mm, mm,
And what happens is that you're always fighting an uphill battle. And the analogy I like to use is that I was filling water in a bucket that had a massive hole underneath. No matter how much
I
water
love
I
that.
put in,
I love it.
no matter how much water I put in, there was a massive hole that was draining. And
Mm,
so sometimes you need to actually work to patch the bucket. And then you
yeah.
can start to begin to recognize that, oh, you know what, my bucket's got water in it. And I can
Mm,
start to notice these things and I can start to be grateful for these small little wins that come on.
yes, yes.
Mm.
And one way of doing that, as you've said, is to praise the effort. So,
Yes.
because so much,
Not the
oh,
outcome. Not the
not
outcome.
the
Praise the
outcome.
input, not the outcome.
Yes, exactly. And even if you don't get the outcome that you want at that moment, you've still had that change of mindset to make that effort in the right direction.
And no effort is unwasted. And I think that's one thing that people think is that they might spend a year doing something and they might not get the outcome, but that effort didn't go to waste.
Oh,
That's all compounding. And that's what
mm,
people don't understand is that that is what you needed. That's kind of like that's built a one pillar on your bridge to the life that you want to get. And
yeah.
so what people don't understand is that all this effort that you do is all compounding over time. And the ability for you to be able to see that and understand that and keep growing on top of that and
Mm,
seeing all these moments as a learning experience, that failure is
mm,
actually not about you, it's just a stepping stone to get you where you want to be. It makes that journey so much easier. And
yeah.
I can't emphasize the importance of having people that share that same mentality as you because it can be very difficult if you're in an environment that keeps pulling you down, that keeps stamping on you. And like the analogy I like to use for this is that you can have two flowers and you can put them into the soil. And if you've got one in the shade, well, I mean, these seeds are identical, right?
Mm,
And if you've got one in the shade and you've got one that's getting stepped on all the time, it's never going to grow. But if you've
mm,
got one in the sun and it's getting its soil
mm,
changed, it's getting
mm,
water, it's going to grow. And so the
mm,
environment's really important. And if that's the one thing that you can change, is surround yourself with people who are going to uplift you, who do believe in you, who are pursuing the same things as you. And quite naturally, you just gravitate towards those things. I like to say that if you hang around the barber shop long enough, you're going to get a haircut.
yeah. I love that. That's
Yeah,
brilliant.
it's very true. So
It's very true. It's very
if you hang
true.
around five people that inspire you, that motivate
Yeah.
you, then you're going to be the sixth.
Yeah.
And if you don't have that in your life, right? Some
Mm,
people don't. I've dealt with these people. Who are the people online? Who are the
mm,
people on the like your YouTube, like Deborah? Like I'm
mm,
inspired by Deborah. I'm
mm.
inspired by this author. I'm inspired by this actor. Like cultivate the people that inspire you and
Yeah.
absorb their knowledge and surround yourself with them.
Yeah. And I think it's important for people to realize that they can go through life changing, wanting to change the tribe that they're in, and there's nothing wrong with that. So it doesn't mean to say that because you chose your tribe as a teenager, that you still need to be in that tribe at age 40. It's
Mm,
it's okay to want to be something different, no matter what age you are.
mm. Yeah, you're bang on, and I think that can be hard though because we're psychologically wired for belonging.
Mm,
And
yeah.
sometimes when we're with a group of people that we've known for so long, it's hard to let
Mm,
go of those people because that's
yes.
where we get our sense of belonging from. But if you really want to change and you really want a life for yourself, sometimes you have to let people go. They no
Mm,
longer serve you. They once served you in a point in your
mm,
life, and you can thank them for that and you can be very grateful for that. But at a point, they either just drag you down towards where you don't want to be, and they kind
Mm,
of really they do kind of suck your energy a lot as
mm,
well. And it's about
yeah,
recognizing that and starting to actually maybe thinking maybe these people aren't aligned with where I want to go.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And so I think what we've discussed so far, sort of we've talked about how we need to begin by being maybe sort of a bit self-aware of where we currently are, and
Self-awareness always.
then finding ways to think about where what we don't want, what we do want, maybe write those down, begin that
Mm,
roadmap, begin that thought process, and then begin to maybe like reverse engineer what we do want and
mm.
cut that down into tiny little steps.
Yeah. A good
Look at the,
exercise that can I
yes,
intervene real
yes, of
quick? Sorry,
course.
Deborah.
No, definitely.
A good exercise that I've had a lot of people really love is you've got two blank pages of pieces of paper,
Mm,
and on the top of that piece of paper, you're right. Who would I be in the absence of all my worries,
mm,
fears, and concerns? So I'll say that again. Who would I be in the absence of all my fears, worries, and concerns? And you just want to write two full pages. You don't think about your answers. You just continue to write. You don't, it's just nothing's right or wrong. You just write for the 2 pages that's done. And you'll find when you do this exercise at the start of the page will be kind of nonsense, like you just kind of
mm.
finding your way. And then when you get to the end of the page or the end of the second page, you start to find some insane clarity of the person that you want to be. You start to write about who this person could be if I didn't have all my absence and worries, and you start to find where did this goal come from, or where did this desire come from?
Mm.
And I found that that's helped a lot of people. It's helped me, and I've shared it with others, and they've say they've had a lot of
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
with that.
yeah. So that's a bit like, because I'm a very visual person. So as you were talking then, I'm thinking about like maybe like a big ball of wool that's all different colors. And it's not until you begin to pull out the threads and look at the colors that you think, wow, actually that color, I thought I wanted that color, but actually it's this color that is really meaningful for me. Pulling
Mm.
on that and then working out where that
And then
goes to,
expanding
where
on
that
it too. Yeah,
exactly,
exactly. Mm.
exactly. Yes, yes. So,
And it's kind of why I've gone into the coaching space as well now as well. Like you said, capital T trauma, it's very important that you go see someone professional and get that
mm,
done because you want professional help for those sorts of things. I think when it comes to the little T traumas or when you have all of these problems in your life, you can do it yourself. You really
mm,
can, right? The caveat of that is that it's going to take time and
mm,
you're going to figure out all this stuff for yourself.
mm,
When you hire a coach or when you hire a therapist or you
mm,
hire a professional, what
mm,
you're doing is that you're buying their mistakes, you're buying their knowledge.
mm,
So you're condensing 10 years worth of work into a smaller period. And so what you're doing is that they're actually just going to show you the path to walk
mm,
instead of you trying to find the path and maybe walk through 5 or 10 different paths that didn't get you to where you wanted. They will accelerate your knowledge and understanding a lot quicker. They'll show you ways a lot faster. So
yes.
for someone that's looking for that speed, I would suggest you go with a coach or a therapist because
Mm,
they will show you the way a lot quicker than what you would
mm,
yourself. But
yes.
I still wouldn't discourage the path to go on your own because you are always
Yes.
going to be on your own and
Mm,
learning that journey. And those
mm,
skills are always going to be important for you.
yes, yes, of course. No, absolutely. You're absolutely right.
Mm,
And I think how do you so when you first take on a new client,
mm,
do you have how do you find where they are? Because obviously you're
yeah,
meeting them where they are.
yeah.
So how do you find that starting point for them? How do you find, is it the point of the easiest resistance? Is
Yeah.
a good starting point for them, or is it is there another way that you get them to move that first step?
Yeah, definitely. I think we mentioned before that the first step is always to build the rapport with the person.
Mm,
You have to listen very empathetically. You can't be judgmental at all
mm,
because you need to be on their team and they need to understand that you're on their team and that you want what's best for them. And then I think the next thing that I listen out for, which is particularly important, is how they view themselves, the
mm,
way that they see themselves,
mm,
because this is going to be very pivotal with the results that they're going to get. And so if I start to notice that someone's kind of in a very fixed mindset, they have a very pessimistic way of looking at life and themselves, I will start to first to begin to focus on that
mm,
because it's very difficult to influence change on someone that doesn't believe that they can change,
mm,
right? You can bring the horse to the water, but you can't make it
mm,
drink.
mm.
So that's a lesson I've learned very early on in having therapy with clients is that you can't force change onto people.
No.
It has to come from within. And
Mm,
so the first thing that I look for, and maybe some benefit for your audience, is how do you see yourself?
mm,
Do you see yourself as someone that is, yes, I'm experiencing this problem, but you know what? I'll find the answer to it and I'll
mm,
persist? Or do you
mm,
see yourself as maybe that you blame others or you think, why me? Or just my luck? Like these languages are all very important to understand on how you see yourself because how you see yourself is how you see the world. And so
right. That's really
if
interesting.
you see yourself as very limited, you'll see the world as very limited. And
Mm,
what happens is that you get results that really reinforce that belief that you have about yourself, and it creates the
mm,
negative loop that we talked about.
mm,
So, without a doubt, the first step is to getting them to change the way they see themselves, to
mm,
notice the patterns of the way they speak. Like I said, language is powerful.
mm,
If you say, I'm anxious or I'm depressed, change it to, I'm someone who experiences anxiety, I'm someone who
mm,
experiences depression, and
mm.
getting them aware of all of those kind of semantics first and then building from there.
Brilliant. No, I really like how you've explained that. And so, just staying on that topic then, just for a second. So,
Mhm.
somebody says somebody has that fixed mindset. So, c- does it take some people longer than others to even recognize that they've got a fixed mindset before they can then begin to change that? And that maybe
Mm.
for some people that can be a bit scary.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it can be scary, and it comes down to really what degree of awareness they have,
Mm,
Deborah, because not everyone has this strong sense of self-awareness about themselves.
mm,
And sometimes people kind of don't want to look at themselves. They
mm,
don't really want to take responsibility for their life. I'm not saying take responsibility for what the trauma, because some people have
mm,
some significant things that
mm,
happen to them, but take responsibility that you are in control with how you feel. You are
mm,
in control with the choices that you make,
mm,
with the how you want to show up in the world.
mm,
And so if someone is really kind of coming to that point, that's when they can start to do it. And I guess all you can really do is just continue just to shine a mirror onto their behaviors,
mm,
right? It's not
mm,
us influencing change. And if you're a partner, like, because I guess a lot of your audience would probably be a partner or a mother
mm,
or a father. It's about asking the right questions to the person that you want to help. It's getting them to see their own behaviors. It's
mm,
getting them to recognize the costs of maybe a smoking addiction or maybe overeating or eating wrong foods. It's getting them to see the cost of it and getting
mm,
them to come to their own conclusions because that's when it's powerful.
mm.
That's when the change really happens because then the person goes, you know what? I don't want to be like this anymore. I'm sick of seeing all the patterns. I'm seeing all the patterns, and you know what? I want to change. And that's when they'll be receptive to what you have to say.
Yeah, yeah. No, brilliant. And I think for a lot of people, those patterns have just become so ingrained. They've become such a normal part of their
A part of who
life,
they are.
but part of
It
who
becomes their
they are.
identity. Yeah.
Yes.
And so that is very threatening to give that up because what are you giving up? You're giving up your sense of self.
Mm,
And that is scary. That is
mm,
very scary to do. And
mm.
so what happens is that people go back to what's familiar because it's
Yeah.
safe. because it's predictable. And so that's where that conflict comes because you've got this ambivalence where
Yes.
you want change, but
Mm.
then you also don't want to change,
Yeah.
right? You want the good body, but you don't want to give up the ice cream and the
Yeah.
snacks.
Yeah.
So, and that's where people are stuck. They're in that push-pull of I want change, but I don't want to give up this, right?
Yes.
And it's understanding that in order to become a new person, the old version of you has to die,
Yes. Yes.
metaphorically, spiritually,
Mm.
ego.
And how do you help somebody to move out of that push-pull situation?
Mm.
How do you support people through that? Is there
Yeah.
questions that you can ask or
Yeah. So there's a modality that I really love to use. It's called motivational interviewing. And I'm not sure if you've heard of it
yeah,
before,
I do.
but
Yeah, I know it.
yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot of great evidence behind it, and
Yeah.
it's especially with addiction because this is where I work
Mm,
mostly with people that struggle with drug use, alcohol use, and
mm,
even now with teens, technology and gaming use
mm,
as well. So it's really about getting them to understand the costs of their behavior
mm,
and getting them to be able to really understand, okay, is this behavior that I'm doing, is it moving me towards the person I want to be or
mm.
away from the person I want to be? And
Yeah.
that's that awareness. And if they understand it's away, it's then asking, okay, what are the costs of this?
Mm,
Maybe it's ruining my relationship with my kids. I'm not having I'm arguing with my wife all the time. My performance at work is not getting good enough. And you
mm,
can start to see that they start to build some evidence logs
mm,
of why this behavior is not an influence for them. And that starts to really cement into them and show them, you know what? This behavior is actually costing me more than it's actually benefiting me. And
mm,
quite often, naturally, when we realize and we sit with that truth, we truly understand that truth,
mm.
it becomes a lot easier for us to make choices that move us away from that behavior. And so it's
Yes.
just really getting them to understand the
Mm,
costs of those behaviors that they're going
yeah.
through.
Yeah. Wonderful.
And
Yes.
that helps with having someone who is trained and can help answer those
Definitely.
questions.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. That's really
Mhm.
about you asking those questions that allow that person to open up and think about, as you say, where they are and the cost that that certain behavior or mindset is having on the wider aspects of their life.
Mhm.
And sort of giving that person the space to then have a think about, do I really want to be like this? Do I really like this? So that they can
That
move
self-reflection. Yeah, it's
self-reflection.
they're gaining
Exactly, yes.
it's the river starting to get clear now.
Mm, mm,
All the dirt, all the dust and the sand is subsiding and they're getting very clear on what they
mm.
want their life to look like. And it's a
Yeah,
lot easier to take action like that when you
yeah.
have that clarity.
And that I think is the first, maybe the first like bottleneck that people come across. And
Mm,
they've maybe been aware, like you say, I love what you've said about the water beginning to clear. And,
mm,
maybe they've been aware of this bottleneck, this sediment, but they
mm.
haven't understood how to deal with that, how to clear that. And once
Yeah, and I
that
think
begins to
yeah.
clear,
Mhm.
and then that's the first main bottleneck maybe that
Mm,
they've come across.
yeah.
And just dealing with that
Mm,
will give somebody a little bit of self-confidence to then move on because there will be other bottlenecks that come up,
100%. Yeah, and it's
that
understanding
you
it's
as a
understanding
therapist
yeah,
help
yeah.
them with.
It's understanding how that behavior serves them.
Mm,
Because quite often when you have people that eat a lot of food, that shop,
mm,
that drink, that take drugs, it's
mm,
not that they're addicted to the chemical or the substance.
mm,
Yeah, it's got addictive properties, but they're addicted to the need that it's fulfilling. And quite
yeah.
often there's a deep emotional need that these addictions or these behaviors are serving for these people. And when
Mm,
they start to recognize that they're using this as a way to serve and compensate for deeper
mm,
emotional needs,
mm,
and they start to develop, more healthier coping strategies,
Mm.
different behaviors, the need for this addiction goes away
Yeah.
because they've started to treat the underlying solution. It's
Mm.
no longer a band-aid over a knife wound anymore. They've
Mm.
actually started to put the stitches on now,
Yeah.
and they've actually healed the wound. And now the behavior goes away just
Lovely.
as a default.
Lovely.
Mm.
And do you ever find that people having gone through that,
Mm.
so they've progressed through that bottleneck, and then they come back for another session with you, and they go, "Oh my God, I just feel so guilty. I now look back and I recognize I I really never wanted to be that person that
Mm.
I was, but I was
Mm.
fulfilling this need, and now that need has gone away. I'm looking back and I'm thinking, but the effect this has had on,
They get a
you know,
sense
the
of shame.
wide, the sense of shame and
Yeah.
the trouble that I've brought maybe to my
Mm.
family, to my
Mm.
workplace, whatever. So how do people deal with those fallout emotions almost from there?
Yeah, and it's a great point, and it does happen all the time. Is that they get that sense of guilt, that sense of shame, that
Mm.
sense that they've wasted their life, the sense that they've destroyed many other people's lives as well as a result of it, and it can be crippling for people as well. So much so that they relapse back into the behavior again,
Oh no,
right?
yeah.
So
Mm.
it's about allowing them to come up with those feelings,
Mm.
allowing them to express themselves. Shame only lives in the dark. It can't live in the light.
Oh,
And I
that's
love Brene
beautiful.
Brown. Brené
Mm.
Brown's done a lot of research on
Mm.
shame, and
Mm.
your audience who struggles with shame, I recommend all of her work. She's phenomenal, but it's about really helping them sit with those emotions. It's
Mm.
helping them to work through it with empathy, kindness, compassion, to show them that they're still worthy as an individual
Mm.
and that their past doesn't necessarily dictate their future. And
Mm.
that's really what's going on there is that they think that their past behaviors and actions, they're projecting that onto their future. And
Yeah.
so it's getting them to realize is that no, you can learn. You're a different person from that now,
Mm.
right? You can make new choices that actually align with who you are now, and you can
Mm.
start to grow and love that type of person again.
Yeah.
And you need the compassion, it needs support. We're social
Mm.
creatures, Deb.
Mm.
We need those people, those connections in our life that really help us. And there was an interesting study that was done on addiction where they had two rats. And I'm not sure if you've heard of this study before, but were dripping cocaine into the water for the
Oh
rats.
wow.
And so what happens is that when the rats were in isolation, they were a lot more addicted towards the cocaine. That would go to it all the
Mm.
time. But
Mm.
when you put a rat in another environment, it still had cocaine water, but they
Mm.
had a community of rats. They no
Mm.
longer went to the cocaine and
Oh
water anymore.
wow, that's fascinating.
Yes. So the power of connection and
Mm.
having that feeling those deep bonds and having someone that sees you and understands you is so powerful for people. And
Yeah.
that's why Alcohol Anonymous, I think that's
Mm.
Alcoholics Anonymous
Mm.
is so
Mm.
powerful because they
Mm.
have a tight-knit community and they help people. And whenever they relapse, they go to that group and they
Yeah.
lift them up together.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's normal, maybe not for
It is
everybody, but
normal.
for some people to do that, have that relapse is quite normal.
100%.
And it's not that they failed, it's just about that they just have to, they've not quite, um, I don't know, how would you
It's not that they
explain
failed.
that?
It's just a stepping stone on their journey again. It's just
Mm.
recognizing that there was a part of myself that I haven't really met or filled the
Mm.
need for. And it's just
Mm.
saying, what is that? It's about having a sense of curiosity about yourself and
Yeah, I
understanding
like
that,
that.
yeah, I think look, I could have a whole podcast about curiosity. Maybe you would have to have me on
Mm.
another time about it.
Definitely, I'd
But
love you to come back on and
but
talk about
uh,
that.
curiosity is like when you're curious about yourself, you're open-minded, you're
Mm.
empathetic, you're compassionate. And it's just having that sense of curiosity is that, you know what, maybe there's a part of me that hasn't been properly healed yet. Let's explore what
Mm.
that is
Mm.
and let's get some help
Mm.
on that.
Yeah.
And it's not
And
tying your worth to the outcome, like
that's
you said.
right.
It's the input.
Yeah.
If you can
It
go the next
is.
day and start fresh again,
Yeah.
celebrate yourself for
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. And I think it is all about being open-minded, always trying to stay open-minded, and it's so easy for us to kind of fall back into like a closed mindset. But
Mm.
once we're aware of it, we keep coming back to this self-awareness thing, really, don't we?
Yeah.
Once
It's the
we are
bedrock of
aware,
everything. It's the bedrock
yes,
of everything.
yes,
It
yes,
really
yes.
is.
So in order to change anything, we have
Mm.
to be aware of that mindset, that thought that was coming in to begin with, for us then be able to say, is that you know, is that worth anything to me? Is that
Mm.
benefiting my life in any way? And if it's not, being prepared to let that go
Mm.
and to know that there is something better out there for for you, for each person. There is a better way just by changing the mindset, which then has then that knock-on effect on what the behavior is.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so it's doing that little step by little
Little,
step,
like you
really,
said, it's the
isn't it?
little steps. It's the little steps in life that compound over time into the meaningful
Yeah,
changes.
yeah, yeah. Good. No,
And
brilliant.
checking
And
your expectations.
yeah, yeah. And I think also what you were saying just before then as well, is it comes back to what I was saying before about living in in the extended family. Is
Mm.
that we used to live in an extended family and now we don't. We don't
Mm.
live in extended families anymore. So we
No.
almost have to find, we've got to find that tribe really, haven't
Yeah.
we? And
And it's hard. It's
it
hard
is
in
hard.
this modern world. I struggle with this a lot, to be
Mm,
honest. Like it's something that's one of my goals for this year is to
mm,
find a tribe, find a sense of
mm,
community. And I'm not
yeah.
some like I'm someone that uh I'm single. I live by myself. I've got some good friends that I see on a
Mm,
weekly basis.
mm,
But even I have that sense of I want that sense of community. I want to be around
mm.
these like-minded people, and I think that's a big something that we're all missing in this modern world at the moment.
Yeah, yeah, we are. And I think that's why we fall back on social media so much, why we're constantly scrolling because
Yeah,
you know, we're
it
we're
fills that
almost
void. It
it
fills
just
the
fills
void.
that
It
fills that
fills the
void
void.
in it,
Yeah.
but then it sort of tips you over into, I mean, what one of my friends once said to me, oh, I'm going to have to stop going onto Facebook because I just see all these people that I know doing all these amazing things and thinking
Mm.
then it kind
Makes you
of
feel bad
reflects
about
back on
yourself.
your own life and you think, well,
Yeah.
my life is crap. Why
Mm.
aren't I doing those amazing things? And I had to point out to her, well, that's just one speck of their life, and the other
Definitely.
99% of their life could be complete crap. I mean, you just don't
Yeah.
know
And
because that's not what people talk about.
exactly. People only put the highlight reels on their social
Yeah,
media, and you've got 1,000 friends, all you're going to see is the highlight reels of their life.
yeah,
So it's you're naturally going to compare yourself. You're actually going to naturally going to get that fear of missing out, going to
yeah,
feel less than, going to feel unworthy.
yeah.
Yeah, technology is a very big thing, and it's something where I'm starting to narrow my focus on a lot more
Mm,
now.
mm,
I've noticed that tech addiction, gaming addiction, like even for the people that are not necessarily addicted, is that technology robs us of our focus.
yeah.
And where you put your focus is where you put your energy, and where you put your energy is whatever grows in your life. And so
Mm,
most people are spending their time on their screen 7 hours a day, and they're wondering why their life isn't any different.
yeah.
And so imagine if you spent that 7 to 5 hours on learning a hobby, learning a new
Mm,
skill,
mm,
going to a community, how much your
mm,
life could inevitably change from those
yeah,
things.
yeah, yeah. And I think you mentioned before about teenagers who were addicted
Mm,
to gaming or something
gaming.
like that.
Yep.
And that must be, I think for parents, I mean, our kids are in their 20s now, but
Mm,
for a lot of parents, that must be scary to suddenly realize that their children, their teenagers or even younger, frighteningly,
mm,
are addicted to something, and the all these ideas are coming into their kids' heads that the parents never even
No
wanted,
idea about. Yeah. Yeah.
had no idea about.
Mm.
And that must be terrifying,
Eh,
absolutely
Yeah,
terrifying.
and but it's the same with social media as well. I mean, when you give your kids to social media as access to TikTok, to
Mm,
YouTube, there it's you're
mm.
not giving your child access to the world, you're giving the world access to your child.
Oh, that's frightening the way you, I love how
Yeah.
you've said that, but oh my goodness, that just brings it home.
Yeah. And so
Mm,
that's really what's happening is that you're getting in your child's most pivotal moments of their development and their
mm,
understanding and they're developing their self-view, their worldview.
mm,
You're allowing external influences to come in, and they don't
mm.
necessarily have your best interests at heart. They don't have your
No,
kids' best interests at heart.
no,
And so
no.
it's, yeah, I think it's really important from a very young age to not allow your kids to have social media. I don't feel like that's important. I feel like you should definitely allow your kids to have technology because they
Mm,
should learn, and it is the modern
yeah.
world. It's never going away.
Mm,
But as a parent, I'm not a parent, but if I was a parent, I'd definitely monitor how much social
mm.
media usage they're getting at that early age.
Yes, yes, yes. And so, do you find that when you coach, maybe like parents and children,
Mm,
are you finding that these same patterns are coming up, like, the loneliness
yeah, absolutely.
and the lack of purpose? Because I think, as a teenager, having a purpose in life is, or at least having a temporary purpose in life is so important, actually
It
having
is.
some sense of direction.
Yeah,
But
and there's
when
none. They don't have
but
any.
there's just none. So there's nothing tangible for
Mm,
somebody to think, yeah, this is what I want. Because
yeah.
all that they understand is things that they see on a gaming platform or
Yeah,
something.
and games fill those needs. And so we have to
Yeah.
look at the gaming industry. The gaming industry
Mm.
is a $200 billion industry. It's worth more than the entertainment and the music industry combined. So I
Yeah,
don't
I
think
didn't
people
know
really
that.
understand. People
No,
don't
I didn't
understand
even.
how big gaming is.
Mm.
Two-thirds of the world population game. So gaming is massive. Gaming is it's very big.
Mm.
And so there's a lot of money in this industry. And so now what these game developers are doing is that they've hired neuroscientists, behavior experts, and they understand how to make a game addictive, how to wire a game.
Mm.
And so they're designing games that are fulfilling child's psychological needs, the needs for mastery, the needs for identity, the needs for community. And so
Mm.
kids are getting all of their needs met through the games. And so what's happening is that they're finding solace into a game,
Mm.
right? Because
Mm.
it gives them the dopamine, it gives
Mm.
them a sense of achievement because they're actually going and playing and winning
Mm.
these things. And I'm a gamer. I've gamed
Mm.
all my life. So I understand this better than anyone.
Mm.
And it gives you a community because you got a like-minded people. You can customize how you look on a game so you can
Mm.
express yourself and you can feel comfortable. You're not next to any bullies because if there's any bullies, what you can do, you can block them and move them out of the list. So you create a very safe
Yeah.
space for yourself here.
Mm.
And that's where kids feel safe because in other words, in school where they get bullied, and then when they come home and they get bullied online as well, it
Mm.
makes such an impact on their life.
Yeah, of course. That must be very,
Mm.
very, very difficult. And
It is. It is.
um,
And I feel for parents.
I mean, how you explained it there is really, how modern food has been for about the last 30 years, 20 or 30
Mm.
years, where you get, big food that
Yeah.
have brought in sort of like nutritionists and psychologists, and, they have made um, food such an addiction. They know exactly the point at which somebody is going to become addicted to this
Mm.
certain food. They spend millions on it. So,
I'd say
and
billions
obviously,
too.
but yeah, and
Yeah.
the same thing is happening in gaming
Yeah.
as well, which is really frightening. So it's like our brains are being, that they sabotaged
And
almost.
look, and it's just how like we go. The key theme of this whole conversation has been awareness.
Yeah.
Having awareness of that. recognizing that that's what's going on. And when you've got awareness, it gives you that sense of power because you're empowered to make a different choice with the knowledge that you
Yeah.
have.
Yeah, definitely.
Mm.
Definitely. So when somebody wants to um sort of find their purpose in life, part of that is going to be a self-awareness of what is currently sabotaging their their life, their time, their something
Mm.
else, and so that they can work on that. But it's
Yeah.
it's it's recognizing that really, isn't
It's
it? And it's
recognizing it. And purpose is a hard one for people, right? Because, look, my personal opinion of purpose is that I see that we have two in life.
mm,
I think a universal purpose is one of self-actualization. It's the process of becoming everything you possible can become. And
mm,
it's that continuous sense of improvement and that can get that helps people in a sense
mm,
because they just gives them a sense that they want to improve themselves. But the second purpose that I feel is more of a calling. It's what are you called to do? What is it that pulls you in that you feel like you're obligated to do it? And I personally feel that that breeds out of curiosity. And it's
mm,
why I feel like curiosity is so important because curiosity is like this endless well of internal motivation.
mm.
If you're curious for something, it's like you just want to know. Like you're not motivated by external needs, you just want to know.
Yeah.
And I think that if you can begin to find an intellectual curiosity, like
Mm,
if you're curious about music, if you're curious about how sport, if you're curious about mental health, like I am,
yeah.
you naturally want to learn more. And as you learn more,
Yes.
you develop more skills, you become more proficient in that. You
Mm,
start to develop a passion for it because you're actually good at something. And then it becomes a purpose when you use your gifts in the service of
mm,
others.
yeah.
And that's when a purpose can become really powerful because it's quite a selfish pursuit at the
Mm,
start. You're doing it for your own sake and your own
yeah.
pleasure. But it becomes really powerful when you use your gifts in the service of others.
Mm,
Because you
I
have something
agree.
that's incredibly valuable that can
Mm,
serve other people and
mm,
help others. And that's when you
yeah.
develop that sense of meaning greater than yourself. That
Yeah.
you actually wake up in the morning, and you're like, you know what, I've got something to do, I've got people to help.
Mm,
And that's
yeah.
that's where you get that deep sense of fulfillment in your life.
Absolutely. I
At
know I
least
agree
for
with
me
that.
personally.
And I can recognize that because when I think on my own weight loss journey, so I've lost
Mm.
6 stone in total over a number of
What's that in
years.
kilos? I'm sorry, I don't know the
That's about
conversion for
like
that.
80 kilos.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Amazing.
So I lost a lot of, and
Jeez,
I've kept the
congratulations.
weight off. Thank you. So that's
Fantastic.
happened over a number of years. And
Yeah.
when I first started on my weight loss journey, I had
Mm.
really had no idea where I wanted to end up. But what caught my focus was well, when I realized that there was a connection between the food I was eating, the way I was feeling, and weight loss, I just wanted to know why. I
Mm.
wanted to know how is it that the food I'm eating can have this effect on my brain and on my body. And so
Mm.
that's when I started like looking like researching and looking more at like studies and
Yeah.
you know and that's what and that research, that focus is what kept me going throughout
Yeah.
all the times when I might have been like on what they call a weight loss stall, when I
Hmm.
might have been, I'm carrying on, eating in a low carb way, but
Yeah.
I'm not losing the weight that I want to lose. But what kept my focus going on staying the course, if you like, was the, oh, I just need to understand
Mm.
why
That
how this is
curiosity.
that curiosity.
Yeah.
And it was that almost insatiable
Desire to want to
curiosity,
know. Yeah.
desire to want to know, desire to understand. I want to pick this apart and
Mm.
I want to understand every tiny little element of it.
Mm.
And as I progressed through time and then started and then went into coaching, and
Hmm.
that was almost like a sort of seamless transition. It's like
Mm.
you're talking about that sort of bigger picture of then going
Yeah.
on to help other people, but it was almost seamless because
Yeah.
it just seemed like a sort of natural
You
progression.
stack the skills. And
Yeah.
funny enough, before I was an OT, I was a weight loss coach, Deb.
Oh,
Yes, so I did a lot of online weight coaching for women in
oh,
particular.
right.
So
Yeah.
yes, yeah. So
Yeah.
I very
Brilliant.
much understand your desire. This was a very important thing to me when I was
Mm,
younger, and
yeah.
understanding calories, understanding like the
Yes.
effects of all of that, and how calories in versus calories out. That
Yes.
yeah. So it's like, and those skills stack on each other, right?
Yeah, they
And it
do.
goes back to what I said is that I didn't end up pursuing a weight loss coaching journey because it wasn't
Mm,
what my heart wanted.
mm,
But the skills I learned
mm,
there carry on now to how I live my life now. I'm
mm.
very regimented in my food.
Yeah.
I understand my portions of my food and what I need to
Mm,
eat for my weight and my height.
mm,
Um, the skills it took to build a business, a coaching business, have
mm,
transpired into my therapy business.
mm.
And that's why I want to give to your audience is that
Yeah.
effort does not go unwasted.
No.
It does not go unwasted. It's always compounding. And so when you
Yes.
follow your curiosity, you build these skills and you get proficient at it.
Mm.
And that's when you begin to help the person who's two steps behind you.
Yeah.
And that's when you can have a real impact in your life. And that's when
That's
you start to
right.
begin to actually build a life that you're actually proud of, that you're inspired to have.
Yes, yes, exactly. No, I agree. I absolutely agree. I think that curiosity aspect of it is,
It's a
and
big
it's
one.
just, and it's huge, and it's really about people finding that. Because somebody might think, well, I don't know what I want. I don't really
No,
know what I like
because they don't know
because
themselves,
they don't
because they
know
haven't taken the
themselves.
time to know
Yeah.
themselves. And that's the thing.
Mm,
And that's what
mm,
it all comes back down on. It's like, what's missing in your life, because
mm,
usually what's missing in your life becomes the most important. When I was
mm,
18 years old, I was scrawny, I was skinny, I didn't have the best body I
mm.
want. That was missing in my life, so that was most important. I worked the skills to do it. As I got older and I was working in the hospital, I kind of felt my freedom was missing a little bit, to be honest. It
Yeah.
was during the COVID time. And I
Mm,
was like, you know what, I want to start a business. But then
mm,
I started a business.
mm.
So it's helping people understand what's missing in your life, how can
Yes.
you build the skills to create that, and then
Yes.
continuing just that process over and over again. It's just a
Yeah.
never-ending journey.
Exactly. And this is it. And I think once you found that that passion, if you like, once your
Mm.
curiosity has taken you to that place, it is a never-ending journey.
It's
It is a never it's it's a never-ending learning, which almost becomes just something wonderful within itself.
yeah, and it can be a double-edged sword sometimes, I feel too, because the more you know, the more you realize you don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
And it does make you feel like, how big really is this mountain?
Yeah,
Because you know what?
this
I
is
feel like I've
it.
been climbing for 5 years and it's like I can't even
Yeah,
see.
I
And
know.
that can be a little bit defeating for people too.
Yeah,
But if you're climbing a mountain that you love to climb, you'll continue to climb it.
you will do.
There's a quote that I love from Steve Jobs is that you can only connect the dots looking back.
Yeah,
And I think it's really good for people that are going through it right now and going
yeah,
through a really difficult period, is that when they get through it, they quite often look back and they say, you know what? I'm so glad that the thing happened in my life because it
yeah,
made me the person I am today. And they wouldn't
yes.
change it.
No.
So that's what happens is like, yeah, it's being able to look at your life from a different perspective, and as
Mm,
hard as it might be, see how can I learn from this? What are the lessons that I've
mm,
learned?
mm.
And trying to take them with you, moving them forward.
Yeah,
Otherwise, you're just going to
absolutely.
get drained into the negative of it.
Yeah, yeah, you are. But there's always, I think, as long as you stay curious and just be
Continue
aware that
learning.
and you're learning, and whatever you know now is probably just there's a vast other amount of information out there that you
Mm,
maybe are not even aware of about yourself,
definitely.
maybe at this moment. So it is this never-ending learning journey, which is a positive thing.
It's imperative to life, I feel.
Yes, yes.
Life and nature is always learning about itself. It's always growing. And so
Yes.
that's, you need to adopt that. If you want to get ahead in life and you want to continue to grow, you have to continuously learn. Stay
Yes.
curious. Stay
Mm,
curious about yourself, stay curious about others, open to different perspectives, curious about your
yes.
craft. And you're always going to have that sense of
And
improvement.
doing that builds self-confidence. Do you
Absolutely, it
think
does.
so? Yes.
100% it does.
Yes.
100% it does.
So
Because you gain more belief in yourself. You start to develop a competence in something. I
mm,
think confidence comes from competence.
mm,
Right? I'm not this type of person. It's like I'm shout affirmations in the mirror. I'm confident. I'm confident. I'm
mm,
confident.
mm,
Because you don't have really evidence to support your claims.
yeah.
So it's quite natural to feel like that. But if you're competent in an area and you know it well enough, you just confidence is a byproduct of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's about finding what that is for you and working towards it.
Yes. Yes. So it's having that awareness of when I find the thing that I'm competent in, that's going to help to build my self-confidence as I'm going along this journey of finding my purpose through life and how I'm
Yeah.
going to put everything together and how I'm going to move on from one step to the next and
Yeah.
having that sense of self-confidence.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think that's something that, a lot of people in the modern world today, so many people feel so insecure, don't they? And they're
Yeah.
constantly
Well,
trying to, have this mask, have this,
yeah.
you know,
There's a quote that I think encapsulates what you're trying to say is that if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it's always going to feel useless.
yeah.
And I feel like, but I feel like that's what we live in these days is that we're trying, like we said, we're trying to be second at being someone else instead of being first at
Um,
being ourselves. Because
yes.
when you're running your own race, you're not in competition with anyone
Mm,
anymore. You're just
no.
trying to be your most authentic version of yourself.
Mm,
And that's when all the comparison just starts to go away because the only person
absolutely.
you're really competing with is yourself. Is how can I be more
Mm,
of myself? How can I embody more? How can I express more of who I am inside?
yeah, definitely, definitely. So just looking at the time now, because crazily enough, we've been talking for
Flies by.
nearly 2 hours. Can
Yeah,
hardly believe it.
yeah,
I mean, it's just gone by in a flash, and I
it
definitely
does
want to get you back on to talk about
for sure.
curiosity. And I
Yeah,
just feel like you say, that's a
it's a big
whole.
thing.
It's a huge thing. So, s- so just as a last point here. So what is this unforeseen force that is maybe killing our potential? Have you got a few words that you can say about that?
Yeah, definitely. I feel that this unseen force that's killing our potential is the inability to focus. I think
Mm,
what we don't realize, we touched upon it before, is that your ability to focus on something is going to change your trajectory of your life.
mm,
Whatever you focus on, if you focus on negative, you get more negative in your life. If you focus
mm,
on positive, you get more positive in your life. And I think being very conscious of where your energy is and where you direct that energy
mm,
is going to be the biggest movement for you in your life. And maybe it's first starting, and I'm just thinking is this of being aware of where your focus is
mm.
going and maybe tracking that. And I think what we've touched upon that's been the golden thread throughout this whole conversation is that self-awareness.
Yeah.
That it really is the key to know that awareness of yourself, awareness of what you
Mm,
want in life, awareness of who you want to be, who you are
mm.
becoming,
Yeah.
and
And
making sure your focus doesn't deviate in the
that's
directions you don't
was
want it
what
to
I
go.
was just about to say, because there are just modern life just seems to draw our focus away before we're even aware that we are in that other place.
Well, we live in an attention economy. So
Mm,
whoever can get your attention that's the new oil in this day and age. You
yeah.
look at these apps, YouTube, Netflix,
Mm,
Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, they're all fighting for what? Your attention.
yeah.
Because the longer that they can keep your attention, the more money that they can make.
Yeah.
And so you want to be able, the only loser in that equation is you,
Mm,
because you're the one that's wasting all your time on those things. So you
mm,
want to win back your focus, reclaim your focus, and
mm,
direct it towards building the life that you want. who you
Right.
want to become.
Yes.
And when you do that consistently, you make the small steps and you do it, man, your life begins to change in ways you can't even begin to imagine.
Yes. And I think what you've said there that is so important is that consistency. It is that consistency. And
Yeah.
whilst we might have the odd day when, our focus is drawn away, having the self-awareness and then bringing it back to where we want to be and just trying to be, no one is perfect, but
No
just
one's
trying
perfect.
to be as consistent as we possibly can be. And that's
Yeah.
what's hard, really, isn't
It
it?
is. Yeah.
Consistently sticking to the focus, keeping our maintaining our focus and not allowing something else to steal our focus away.
Definitely. And you're not going to be able to give 100% every day, but if you can give 20% that day,
Yeah,
it's still a win. It's
yeah,
still moving you in the right direction where you want to go. And I
yeah.
think it's about having a bit of compassion for yourself on that journey. And that goes a long way. Is start to become your own best friend. Start to
Oh, that is
actually
beautiful. Yeah,
start
that's
to, because
wonderful.
you know what, the way that we talk to ourselves, we would never dare to talk to another person like. And
Mm,
so I think start to become your own best friend because you're going to spend a lot of time with yourself over this
mm,
journey. And
mm.
so you want to be your biggest cheerleader.
Yeah, I agree. And that's a wonderful place to draw this conversation to an
Mm,
end. I think we've ended on a really, really positive note. The whole conversation has been so positive, and I think everybody can take something away from this wonderful conversation that we've had today about purpose and, how to change our focus as we go through life and and
mhm.
and recognize our values. And so thank you so much
No worries. The
for
next one, I'll
chatting
make sure there's a little
today.
bit
And
more light in the room.
it's been such a wonderful conversation. And
Likewise, Deborah.
yeah, so Stefan, thank you so much. I've really, really enjoyed today, and I do hope that you'll come back on again soon and have
Absolutely.
another chat with me.
Beautiful. Thank you very much for having me, Deborah. We
Okay, see you
appreciate it.
soon. Bye.
Take
Bye
care.
for now.